The bouncing ball is the one that takes precedence this time of year, but we're still talking football here at Iowa Live. Appreciate you stopping by for Hawkeye Talk here each and every Tuesday. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We appreciate your contributions as well. Corey Brad right next to me, of course, from the Hawkeye of the Storm is the channel. Hopefully you are locked in already here on YouTube. If you're not, again, from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Hey, Corey.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm good. I told you when I got here, I'm going all Homer on you. So people don't often say, I don't wear a ton of Iowa stuff. And sometimes that makes people upset. I also think it's kind of weird to care what somebody wears, but
as long as they're fully clothed. Sure.
Yeah. You and I have both experienced the opposite of that on live streaming, unbelievably so. But anyways, going well, working from home today, so I figured I'd go a little extra casual. But yeah, it's going to be a fun couple of weeks for basketball. The men somehow made the Big Ten tournament, and so I guess that's an accomplishment now that not everyone makes it. So they'll play your Buckeyes tomorrow.
What's that, like a 15-16 game or something?
15-10, I believe.
Okay.
15-10, yeah. So Ohio State should be, well, no, you know what? They're borderline NCAA, so this is a big game for them. Iowa's not borderline NCAA. They're going to have to go to they probably have to win this whole tournament. I think if they get to Sunday and put up a fight, then maybe they'd sneak in, but they're nowhere close to the bubble. They're probably 10 to 12 spots out at least. But Iowa struggled. It's crazy. This is the third straight year they've played Ohio State out of the gates of the Big Ten tournament. Very strange. Yeah. And of course, the women just lost to the Buckeyes in a real tight battle last week. So it's been Iowa and Ohio State a lot. And we had the overtime game women's side here about a month ago. And so for some reason, these two programs keep matching up. And we got a commitment out of a receiver on the football side. I know you and I are going to talk about that happened, I believe, last Wednesday. And you and I are also going to talk quarterback play, which is perfect given the analyst that was hired to the staff here a few days ago. So spring football right around the corner, and once March Madness, tones down a bit, people start thinking about the gridiron again.
It's a very traditional looking shirt as well, with the block Iowa across the board.
Very simple. People have noticed with my clothing, I wear very simple clothes. Even with my t-shirts, when I'm going relaxed, I wear a lot of plain Jane polos.
I do too.
Yeah.
I don't have a bunch of crazy designs on my shirts. No.
You do have the top 25 that actually makes sense zip up, though. Is that a quarter zip? Is that a half zip? Is it a full zip?
No, it's a jacket.
Okay. It's a full zip. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't tell. It looked like a half zip there for a second. Okay. Very cool.
I love this jacket.
Does it keep you warm?
It's just comfortable. Keeps me warm. It's pretty pathetic that I put on a jacket a couple hours ago. I did a series of shows along with Michigan Podcast, and about halfway through, I was like, it's pretty cold out, and I was going to go out for a little walk, and I looked at the temperature. It's 70 degrees outside, so maybe it's just a little cool in here or something. I don't know. But
We'll see. On Friday, I wonder if we're going to be a little warmer than you. It's supposed to get up to 78 here.
Well, then you may be just that.
And the Great Plains are supposed to be hit with a variety of weather. Sounds like maybe historic low pressure system moving into the area, potential for dust storms down in Texas, and blizzards up in the Dakotas into Minnesota and northwestern Iowa, and then severe tornadic systems from Iowa down through some of the southern states and even up into Missouri and Arkansas. So hopefully everybody stays safe. Could be a wild weekend. Sometimes when you get those early storms and those early systems and the heat behind them, man, it's or in front of them, I should say, boy, it can get ugly. So best of wishes for everybody staying safe this weekend.
Absolutely. I was unaware of any of that potential. Brody Schaefer, do we have a profile on your channel about one Brody Schaefer?
Not yet. So I'm going to be ripping off profiles basically as soon as the men's season comes to an end. So assuming that is this week, we're going to start ripping off profiles. We got a couple of transfer portal videos that I've been teasing for weeks now. And I know some people I've heard some people say, why aren't we getting videos on these things? This is just, as you know, heats up with basketball this time of year, but we got all off season. So we're going to be talking a lot of these guys, including Brody Schaefer, who he'd been trending Iowa for a while, but his recruitment has picked up, and he's got good size. Wisconsin kid that Wisconsin did recruit. I don't know that they ever officially gave him an offer, but he had offers from Jimmy. I believe it was Jimmy. What's his face from? Is it Rogers from Wazoo?
Yes,
I can't think of his last name. Rogers. Yeah, you should know of all people. And then Northwestern offered him as well. And so yeah, he's one of these one of the few receivers that Lester has actually recruited and landed from the high school ranks. That's what we forget. Yeah, they landed guys out of the portal, and Jacob Gill and a kid from Chattanooga this year, but they have not had as many guys out of, this is what, his second or third receiver that was actually fully his. And it'll be exciting to see what he does. And receivers always have the opportunity to play early. He had a bunch of really good Ivy League offers, which I know fans are going to kind of chuckle at that, but obviously proves he's a pretty smart kid to be getting offers from the likes of Cornell. Lindenwood's a very good institution, not Ivy League, but very good institution. Hey, Texas State's been a great offensive program in recent years, Mark. Not that that means anything, but Yale, how about that? How about a Yale offer? North Dakota State, couple of the best FCS programs. So I know the first inclination with a kid like this, when you look at, well, he's only got a Wazoo offer. They're no longer Power 4, and then Northwestern is Northwestern. So why should we be excited? It's sort of, you're kind of in a holding pattern because we don't yet know what Tim Lester is going to be able to accomplish with wide receivers at Iowa. But his track record does speak for itself. You can't call it apples to apples to what happened with the Bryan era, where they were getting lowly recruits that never panned out because, well, either because they weren't worth it or they just didn't get developed here. We don't ever question Phil Parker when he gets 2 to 3 star DBs. So we'll see. Let's see what happens with Tim. This is going to be a big gauge year, and certainly a big gauge spring with some of these young receivers, with Lester having been here about a year. Bud Meyer's only been on the job as a receivers coach for about a year as well. And now, of course, you get the new analyst in, who we talked about him last week, has quite the resume to be a unpaid analyst on staff. So all of this will be interesting to see how it pans out. But congratulations to Schaefer, and we'll get a profile on him and a bunch of other kids here in the coming days over on my channel.
So we have some stats here, courtesy Max Preps. So he was playing quarterback this past year.
Well, you know more about him than I do. Then.
I am double checking on this. It's the same. It's the proper hometown out of Winnacone, Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm assuming everybody was recruiting him as a receiver. I know I don't think he broke the top 100 nationally for, let me see what 247 Sports has him as the 126th best receiver in the class. And, but I mean, listen, this is the 26th class. There's plenty of time for Lester to identify and pursue the kids he wants. So this isn't, we saw some last ditch efforts under the previous administration, if you will, previous staff, offensive staff. So I'm a little, again, more patient when I see a guy like this who maybe he's flying under the radar, but whose recruiting has picked up of late. But without studying his tape, I can't give a great feel for what I expect out of him. But the passing, I mean, his passing, go back up to his passing numbers, Mark.
Well, I was going to say he was a receiver the previous year. So look at 23-24, 34 catches, 11 yards per reception, 5 touchdowns, played some varsity ball as a freshman, scored 2 touchdowns as a receiver. So primarily a receiver in 10 games played the previous season, because there's virtually no rushing and 0 passing numbers the previous year. But last year, he became the starting quarterback, apparently.
Really good numbers, too.
Yeah.
Threw for 71%.
71%, 18 touchdowns. I can't find the interceptions because it's just not helping me out on that end of the deal. But
he also ran. Look at that. He ran
for
1,700, over almost 1,800 yards.
And that's 31 touchdowns.
Yeah. So obviously he can move. Obviously he's going to come in as a receiver. Last time Iowa recruited a quarterback to play receiver would have been Alex Moda, but he hasn't seen the field yet. James Reeser, I know, switched to receiver, but he came in initially as a quarterback. But again, those two guys were Brian guys. So Marvin McNutt's an excellent example of a former quarterback turned receiver. And a lot of these kids are great athletes. They can play multiple positions. They do play multiple positions on both sides of the ball throughout high school. So I don't know I have not looked up his track times. I can try to find his track times.
Could we possibly be questioning the level of play?
Right. Yeah, always. That's what, that's funny that's gotten brought up a number of times over the years with Coach Patterson. And, he's not on the recruiting trail. He's not looking, combing through film. He doesn't have access to the film. I mean, looking at huddle tape does not make you an expert on some kids' abilities. But that's always one of the first questions he asks is, what's the level of football? He had and I would never repeat who it was, but he had a coach. He had a well-known coach tell him one time, I believe it was either at a coach's clinic or on his staff. He shared this before. He said, in front of someone else, in front of other people, I think it was at some event because he spoke in front of a crowd. And this guy said, I can look at you can look at a kid's tape for about a minute and know if he's a high major prospect or not. And after the event was over, Don took him aside and he said, you can't say that to people. You cannot say that to people because that's quantifiably false. And that's not true. You cannot look at somebody for a minute. And so it is more of a science than maybe some people think it is. Even coaches, I mean, I don't know, it'd be interesting to poll coaches on a number of different subjects, but that'd be one that would be interesting. What qualifies a kid to be offered a scholarship? Wouldn't that be kind of a cool study to do if you could poll all the Power 4 head coaches and just say, because some programs are handing out scholarship offers like there's no tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some that they really hold back and are a lot more picky. Iowa was one of those schools. But obviously there's some schools that value character more than others, I think, in background, etc. But I'm looking at Brody Schaefer's. I'm not seeing numbers from him. Let's see here. It's always interesting when you're trying to find 100-meter times because obviously some kids aren't running the 100-meter in high school, and I am not seeing his. I think I looked this up when he initially committed last week. I'm not seeing any numbers for him. So that's the other thing that Coach Patterson always brings up is, there's some kids that are on scholarship at Iowa, have been on scholarship that didn't run track in high school. And he says that's always a concern of his right away. It doesn't mean you discount a kid, but I'll give you a perfect example. Seth Anderson was not a track and field guy. He was a wrestler. Now, his dad was a really good receiver. In fact, he has the single game receiving record for the NFL when he played for the Rams. But, and his brother played high major football at Utah, and I think has played professionally in the NFL. But, that would be a concern of his. So, those are two things. If you're looking at a kid that it commits, and you can see Schaefer's got a pretty good frame. He's considered 6'1". I'm sure there's an understanding that's unique to him, having played quarterback in high school, that he'll be able to utilize at the next level. But see, like watching this 13-second clip, that might be fascinating to fans, but does it tell you and I anything other than that he has the ability to go up and catch a football? Like, I don't think this route isn't like some crisp thing of beauty, like, but it also doesn't tell me he's not going to be cut out. Like, I'm guessing Lester is more of the Don Patterson. He's cut from the Don Patterson cloth, that it is a science and it takes time to develop that relationship. And there he is with John Budmeyer in that picture you just passed. But again, I would have to think Tim is super involved with all receivers and who gets offered. It's not like if I'm guessing, I don't know this, but I'm assuming Seth Wallace is given pretty good, they recruit different areas, but I'm guessing Seth Wallace is, you're playing flag football out here and there's no line.
This Jonas Williams is a top flight quarterback prospect.
Is that who's throwing it to him here?
Yeah.
Well,
he can catch the ball. The ball is wide open.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does this show? What does this tell me? The fact that
Well, it's video.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
I know you're
it's
looking at
something.
Twitter, but yeah, what were we talking about? Oh, it's not like if Phil Parker probably gives not penultimate control, but close to it to Seth Wallace when he's recruiting linebackers. Even though Phil's been in the business forever, I think Seth has earned that. John Budmeyer has not earned that. With all due respect to a nice guy, John Budmeyer, he's not earned it yet. So Tim Lester knows more about receivers than John Budmeyer. And I'm sure Lester knows that he knows more about receivers than Budmeyer. And my hope is that Budmeyer knows that Lester knows more about receivers than he knows. So, I mean, it just is what it is. And frankly, the guy who they brought in as an analyst probably knows more about receivers than John Budmeyer knows about receivers. And who knows, maybe he's coming in to help more so Budmeyer. Hey, Budmeyer came in as an analyst to help Brian Ferentz at quarterback. Now, it didn't work. But that's the position he was coming in to help him with. Lester don't need help at quarterback. He's a former quarterback. So if there's anybody on the staff that might need some assistance, personnel-wise, it's John Budmeyer, with all due respect to John Budmeyer. So this is a fascinating situation. Like I say, I'll be fascinated to see what this team looks like here in a month at the open spring practice. And obviously, we don't know who all is going to be available and ready. You hope the guys like Seth Anderson is, they're good to go. And, I think we're going to talk quarterback today. Man, it's just without seeing Gronowski out there, it's just like, I don't know what we learned from spring. I guess we learn who the other guy is, right? And then it comes down to that guy versus not this. There can't still be movement between now and the end of August, but is there any chance Hank Brown is better than Brendan Sullivan? Jackson Stratton, he's still here. Is he going to be so buried that he enters the portal again? I mean, those are storylines, but we're not going to learn who the starter is at the end of spring. Some places will. Some places it will be basically the decision will be made, and guys will literally enter the portal looking for new homes. Now, I don't know to what extent, Mark, you probably have a better feel for that than I do, to what extent quarterbacks up and leave after spring ball. I know it happens, but if they're going to do it, this is their last chance ahead of the season. It's also hard to go somewhere else after spring ball and then, somewhere big and gain traction, gain leverage heading into summer conditioning and then fall.
Yeah, most of the portal movement post spring the last couple of years, or ever since the portal became a thing, had to do with depth pieces, guys that were just not able to upgrade their position on the depth chart where they weren't happy. They thought they could go somewhere else and get some playing time, but we're not talking about frontline star players transferring after spring practice. But with the way money's being circulated, if that does start to loosen up a little bit, that's going to be the cause. It's not going to be because they don't like where they are, or they're not getting playing time.
By the way, I just found numbers for Brody Schaefer, track and field numbers for Brody Schaefer, 2023 Winnacone numbers. He ran, good news for people who are concerned about it. He runs the 100 meter, or has run the 100 meter up until, I guess, this past year. I don't see anything for 24. So 2023 numbers, 100 meter time outdoor numbers, 12:22, 12, 12:23, 12:1, 12:37, personal best of 12:83. Not seeing anything about wind, but those are probably not. Those aren't anything amazing, right? I think if for a receiver, if you're, at a high, I'm not a scout or, a recruiter, but I would think you'd want to see, for the faster receivers, low 11s, 100 meter time.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't, he's not going to probably be here. He's not coming in as a speedster. I think we can agree on that. So there's other criteria involved. They do have guys, I think, that they like. Now, again, he's coming in 26. He'll be here this year anyways, but they do have guys on this roster who I think have the potential. We talked to receiver, I think we were talking about receivers last week, the week before, that can take the top off the defense. We've seen Jacob Gill take the top off the defense. Now, he's not the fastest guy on earth, but we saw him at UCLA make a big play down the field. And had they had more consistent, non-injury riddled quarterback play last year, maybe he would have been able to take a few of those to the house. I think Seth Anderson has underrated speed, hasn't been able to stay healthy. Who else did we talk about last time we were talking about receivers? Kid from Chattanooga. Why is his name escaping my mind? We just talked about him. Anyways, receiver 5'9" speedster from Chattanooga, whose name escapes me. Sam Phillips. That's one I can't think of that. Sam Phillips. He's another one who probably doesn't have all world speed, but has probably better speed than most in the room. So I would say fastest receivers that I would guess would probably be Sam Phillips, Seth Anderson, Caden Weegan. Caden Weegan's got to be at the top. Can he be a factor on the offensive side? That's the question. We know what he can bring on special teams. So they probably don't need, they got young, besides Caden, who's going to be gone after 25, but they have some younger speedsters. Sam Phillips, I think, is going to be gone as well. He's got this 1 year left, but Seth Anderson does he have one more year? No, I think he's done too. So yeah, Alex Moda is supposed to have good speed, supposedly. They're actually losing more at receiver this year than I would have thought. And that may not be a bad thing because they're just going to keep hitting the portal every year. But like the guys that I would perceive to be at the top of the room should be strong this year because of the fact that they have Gill back, senior. They have Weegan back, senior. They brought in Phillips this year, senior. And they bring Seth Anderson back, senior. I mean, that's 4 guys that you could argue their top receivers are in those 4 guys. Now, maybe Vanderzee works in there as a sophomore again, but they got a lot of experience in that room, even if it's not been all at Iowa.
Hawkeyes Live contributions appreciated right here at the Voice of College Football. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are options as well. And you see those links. They're down in the description section. Join Corey this week with basketball coverage beginning when? When did the Hawkeyes and the Buckeyes get together?
I'll throw the banner up there. Tomorrow evening, 5 p.m. Central Time tip, Peacock. And we'll have post-game coverage after that game. And if they do advance, which I don't necessarily expect, but I certainly don't discount. I think there's more pressure on Ohio State, certainly. And Iowa's been in this position before against this very Buckeye team, and they've squandered. So sometimes pressure can get to you. We'll see. But if they win, we'll be back on Thursday every day this week until they lose. And then the women's show, they release the women's bracket Monday. And then their March Madness starts the following week.
All right. Hawkeye fans, Disputed National Champions is the book. It's out there on Amazon. Just look it up, Disputed National Champions, or the easy way is the links in the description section down below. Give it a look, and I believe you will enjoy it, as many people have and commented back. And we appreciate the positive ratings and reviews we have received. All right, so somebody's got to throw these guys the football. And before I will do at some point post-spring a deep dive on the quarterback situations across the Big Ten, I think at first glance, Iowa has the opportunity for the first time in a long time to have one of the better quarterback situations in the conference.
You think so?
Yes.
You really believe they have one of the, so what does that mean? Does that mean you think they have one of the better rooms in the conference?
Well, it's a combination. It means that obviously if the starters stay healthy, all that matters is your starting quarterback being as good as possible.
Okay.
If that's not the case, then you want depth as well. So it's a combination of two. I think Mark Gronowski, I've never watched him play. I've watched him throw like 5 passes. I've never watched him play. I've seen highlights after he signed. I did my due diligence of watching about 25 seconds of Mark Gronowski.
And what'd you think of those 25 seconds?
I don't recall them, but I'm sure that they were fine.
Well, then it's hard for me to ask you the follow-up question, because my question to start with is, assuming Gronowski's the starter, because I remember when they brought in Cade McNamara, and both years that McNamara was here, you said, I don't think he's probably top half of the conference. You said maybe top half, I think. Well, I don't know where you said, because I thought for the situation, he was one of the better quarterbacks for his situation. You know, it didn't pan out. He got hurt. But what they needed at that time under Brian, I thought he fit the mold perfectly, but it just didn't work out.
I agreed with you at the time, too. I said, this is a good addition. He's a smart quarterback. He can read the field and he knows what he's doing. He doesn't make mistakes.
But
He's
now
going to
he's
be
at Eastern
supported by
Tennessee.
run game and all those things. But I was pretty adamant about him not being a top level Big Ten, or even, yes, I was calling him a mid to lower tier Big Ten quarterback,
And now he's at East Tennessee State.
which backs up my point. But in Iowa's situation with that defense and special teams, that could have been enough had he
So
played better and stayed healthy.
let's do a little. Let's approach this a little differently than we have other situations, other position previews. I want to ask you. I want to go through our quarterbacks because you've seen. I know you saw very little of Gronowski, but you've seen extended play from Brennan Sullivan. You've seen extended play from Jackson Stratton because he started last year at Iowa, and even I'm guessing you watched some Hank Brown because he's played in games. Didn't he play against
He
Alabama?
played one game against
Not
New
Alabama.
Mexico State or
No, he did
somebody
not. He
horrible.
played a game against he played a bowl game, Mark. He played an entire bowl game.
Wait a minute. I believe if we pull up the stats, we will see that last year Hank Brown played against
I'm not talking
Auburn's worst opponent, New Mexico or somebody.
talking about last year. I'm saying the year before that.
I didn't finish my statement. Then the previous year that he played against Maryland in the bowl game,
Correct.
and I think he even was either the starter who got benched or he was the mop-up guy. He didn't play like 30 pass attempts.
Okay, no, you're right. But he threw for 132 yards, so that's more than a little action there is what I'm saying. You've at least gotten a glimpse of him, have an idea of what his stock would have been in the portal, and then he got benched. So let me ask you this: knowing what you know about the other quarterbacks in the conference, other presumed starters in the conference, let's start from top or from bottom to top.
Mm-hmm.
And you tell me, assuming this Iowa player is the starting quarterback, where in the conference would they rank? I don't need a number, but where in the conference would they rank among starting quarterbacks? So let's start with Jackson Stratton. If Stratton was the starter, is he bottom of the conference?
Yes.
Okay. If Hank Brown is the Iowa starter, is he bottom of the conference?
Yes, but I will distinguish those two by saying, based on what I saw of Jackson Stratton, especially considering the circumstance at the Rose Bowl against UCLA versus Hank Brown, I'll take Jackson Stratton.
Really? Former walk-on.
Just based on that sample.
Okay.
I'm not watching practice.
Yeah. They're both Lester guys. You could argue now they're both Lester guys.
I thought Stratton played pretty well considering the circumstances.
Stratton, I believe what's ironic about that, didn't Stratton, his one start was at Maryland. So you can literally compare Stratton versus Maryland to Hank Brown versus Maryland. But anyways, so those are the two guys. And then let's take it a step further. Brendan Sullivan. If Brendan Sullivan, now that's where it gets interesting. If he is the starter, knowing what you've known about Brendan Sullivan, assuming normal growth, where does he rank in the conference?
Off the top of my head, 10 or 11.
Really? That high? I would have guessed you had said bottom fourth.
It's a pretty young and inexperienced collection of Big Ten quarterbacks this year.
Yeah. Well, that gives me. It's unfair for me to even ask you about Jimmy Sullivan because he's a freshman, although he did come during bowl prep. But man, can you imagine if he ends up being all these guys that have played, like not amazing resumes or amazing experience, but they've all played. That's a novelty, or that is a blessing to have all these guys that have set foot in the field. Like nobody's going to be deer in the headlights. You see what I'm saying?
That's one of the reasons I made that initial statement.
Yeah, nobody's going to be deer in the headlights. And if they are, it means they've had more injury issues than they did last year, and Jimmy Sullivan is the guy. So, and it's just huge that they got him for bowl prep and spring. Oftentimes they don't get a quarterback till summer. So, yeah, unfair to ask you about Jimmy Sullivan. If Gronowski is the quarterback, where does he rank? Based on, I know you haven't watched a ton of it, but the rest of the conference, where would you say he ranks? This is a hard one. Is he top 10?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I was going to put him like 5 or 6.
Really? So that I
Yeah.
think that's nothing against Mark Gronowski, and I may have without seeing him live in Iowa uniform, I have a hard time evaluating. I'm gonna hold off on judgments because I learned the hard way with Cade McNamara, and we looked at Cade McNamara on the field against high level competition. We were watching Mark Gronowski, albeit with lesser receivers against FCS competition. I got to see him, and he's coming off this injury, but I would have guessed you'd have said maybe top 10. That says more, I think, about how you view the rest of the conference's quarterbacks
Correct.
because he's more of a. I think we can all agree on this. He is a better version of Cade McNamara. He's a winner. He's old. He's had injury issues, but not as staunch and recent, although this one is a minor setback. He's a better athlete with a better arm. Like he's just, to me, every category, he's a notch above what Cade McNamara was or what we perceived him to be. And I don't know that if Tim Lester had been here 2 years ago, first of all, we wouldn't have been in the mess that we were in. But if he had been here 2 years ago, I don't know that they would have went after Cade. My guess is they would have gone after other people and gotten somebody better.
You are going through the same check marks and going through the same analysis just with a different player. I'm thinking about what Max Brosmer did at Minnesota last year, and with the understanding that he's less talented in terms of arm talent and velocity and less mobile, not significantly, but I understand that Gronowski's not Michael Vick, but that he's much more of a threat on the ground, and Brosmer is not at all. And he was a top 5 to 7 quarterback in the Big Ten last year.
Only difference, to be devil's advocate on that, is Brosmer broke records at New Hampshire through the air. Different level, but I'm just saying Gronowski's numbers at South Dakota State were usually pretty pedestrian. Part of the reason is because they didn't need to throw the ball. Other part of the reason is he ran the ball real effectively. They ran. I mean, obviously, the best teams in college football typically are balanced on offense, control the ground game, control the game with the ground game, and that's kind of what they've been. They've been, national contenders, national champions since he got there. So that would be the only difference I would point to. He's not like some unbelievable stats guy. And so that, neither was Cade, right? Cade came as a winner, but the difference is who is evaluating him. And I do think he's a much better athlete. The injury thing, and I know fans, a lot of they're everybody's polarized by things now, but there's one segment of the fan base that's concerned about the injury. And there's another part of the fan base that says it's no big deal. I think we can, again, try to be balanced and say it's somewhere in between. We don't know because we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him with these receivers, with this staff, with this offense. And we have not seen him recover from this injury. Yes, he had a serious knee injury early in his career. Yes, it's been a long period of time in between, but nothing's guaranteed with procedures and rehab. So that should make fans nervous. Now, I don't want to say, crawl up in the fetal position in the corner of your man cave all off season and worry about it and rock yourself to sleep. But I do think that it's something that's a question mark. It's fair to say it's a question mark, and it should give all the quarterbacks that are on the roster, including freshman Jelly Roll, Jimmy Sullivan, all the way up to Brendan Sullivan, who played most of last year, reason to believe that they can overtake his spot. Now, I don't think they will. I still think Gronowski will probably be the starter in the fall, but that's the approach those guys got to take. And if they're good enough, then maybe they will. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time where, again, he doesn't have any background with Iowa, has not been able to do anything through winter and now into spring. And he's not going to really be able to work out with full team workouts until August, just weeks before the season. That's the concern. And so those other guys have, even Jimmy Sullivan has somewhat of an advantage to some extent with Iowa. But then Mark Gronowski brings tons of experience at a high level. And he's also got experience in Kinnick. Remember, he came and played in that game in 2021 and, didn't play well against that Iowa defense. But he is I'll say this from off the field perspective. And I have had conversations with people that know Mark. He is a different person than Cade. Like, he's totally a different person than Cade. nothing against Cade McNamara. He was esteemed as a leader when he got to Iowa. And I thought it was a little strange, but at the same time, you want to embrace that. You want to believe that the leadership is at an all-time high. And I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm also not saying it was fool's gold or phony. But then you hear some different things later in his career. Mark Gronowski's a different type of leader, but he's a strong leader. I think he's a charismatic guy. He's not a cocky guy, based on what I've been told. And I think his roots may probably just the fact that he comes from South Dakota State, although he's a winner there. He understands he's coming up a level. Cade McNamara, in a sense, was a guy who had it all at Michigan, took him to a Big Ten championship, college football playoff, and he's kind of lowering his standards to resurrect Iowa. It's just different circumstances. So I think that plays to Iowa's advantage. And the best case scenario is that he's the starter because I think he's got the best upside of all of them. I still think Brendan Sullivan would be a Big Ten level starter. The biggest concern is what we saw in the second half against Mizzou, is it seemed like the big moment got to him. And obviously with Mark Gronowski's pedigree, that might be the one thing that he does not lack. He does not lack confidence in big moments. So that's what he brings. That's the one big thing besides just winning. That's the one big thing that he brings to the table that none of those other quarterbacks can say. He's been in huge moments and performed at a high level. And that's what Iowa needs. If they're going to, with this roster, I think they have a chance of being pretty good. The schedule's difficult. If they're going to in any way compete for a 12-team playoff, he's got to be able to perform in big moments because history tells you that the defense will keep them in games and give them opportunities to win some of those games. But the difference oftentimes in the sport is quarterback play.
I consider Drew Allard to be the only elite quarterback in the league that's proven.
So Hudson Card's gone, right?
Yeah.
Talia's gone. We know he was gone.
Will Howard's gone.
Will Howard's gone.
Dylan Gabriel's gone.
Gabriel's gone. Keaton Slovis.
Will Rogers.
Who's a kid from USC that transferred to Louisville?
Miller Moss, gone.
Miller Moss is gone. I don't know that you would have considered him elite. Dylan Raiola's not elite?
No.
Interesting.
An elite quarterback right now?
Well, no. We're projecting to some extent, right?
Well, I was going to make a separate category. So Drew Allard is the only guy that I consider he's arguably the best quarterback in the country coming back. It's like top five.
You think he's best? Maybe. Okay. That's it. I'm surprised to hear you say
he's a top 5 quarterback coming back in college football.
Yeah.
And then after that, you've got the wild card. Well, it's not a wild card. You've got the unknown, but it's almost a certainty that the Ohio State quarterback is probably going to post the best stats, even though he's never thrown a pass.
And who's the Ohio State quarterback?
Well, it's probably going to be Julian Sayin, but they've got, of course, a couple 5-stars falling over each other, and it's going to be, you would expect, another C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. Those guys were unproven, but it turned out. So that's what's expected, but they're not proven. He's not proven. But then you get this collection of guys that they've proven that they can handle a big-time college football team, but they've not performed at some great level like a Dylan Raiola, who had a very shaky season.
Billy Edwards at Wisconsin.
Billy Edwards, Preston Stone.
I'm sorry, not Wisconsin. He's at Michigan, doesn't he? Where's Billy Edwards? See, Wisconsin. Who's at Michigan?
Well, Mikey Keene is their transfer quarterback that they picked up from Fresno State. But most likely Bryce Underwood, their hotshot freshman, is going to be the starter.
Yeah, he's kind of like another Dylan Raiola of last year.
Yeah.
And then who's the kid from the Illinois quarterback is back?
Luke Allmeyer.
He could be. I'll tell you what, there's a guy that could be your under the radar quarterback to watch in the league. Obviously, Illinois was a lot better than a lot of people expected them to be as the season went on, and he's a really experienced guy who's won football games. So,
there's a pack of guys that have proven something, and he's one of them.
Mendoza.
Well, there you go.
Here's another one.
Mendoza.
Indiana.
Aiden Childs at least played a season and played reasonably well and showed flashes.
Against Iowa. Who did he show Did he show flashes against anybody else other than Iowa? Yeah, so I don't know. And then Oregon's bringing in who? Who'd they bring in?
Well, most likely their starting quarterback, there's going to be a battle, is former 5-star Dante Moore.
Yes.
So he's inexperienced.
And he was UCLA, correct?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I think the conference is in line to take a step back. Am I wrong about that? And I'm not just saying that about quarterback play, but just with everybody that has been, I think Michigan's going to take a step forward. I'm not saying Ohio State takes a step back, but they're obviously losing a lot of talent. But they lose talent every year, so you just expect them to reload. I don't know that Iowa's going to take a step back, but prior to the combine, I would have said, yeah, they're losing a ton of talent. We talked about that. But yeah, then you look at quarterbacks across the league, and hey, the coaching carousel is always affecting things. You have different coordinators, Penn State and Ohio State, and I mean, you've got a different coach at Northwestern, right, or a different coordinator. I mean, at Northwestern. So yeah, this is busy. Obviously, with goes without saying, it's as busy coaching and player carousel as we've ever seen.
Penn State is at least my safe favorite.
Well,
but I still tend to believe that Ohio State they have the potential to be better.
They also got one of
the safer.
On paper, they got one of the best defensive coordinators, or excuse me, they got their offensive coordinator, correct?
Defense.
Defensive. Jim Knowles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they got one of the best DCs, stole one of the best DCs in the game. And they have maybe the only sure thing at quarterback, or certainly the only sure elite quarterback in the conference. And they have a head coach who's been there forever. But I will say they, once again, have not been able to break through. And they finally made the playoff this year. But I don't know if you see you tend to disagree with me on James Franklin, don't you? Because I question him in big. It's just like I question some like Brennan Sullivan in big moments. I've not seen James Franklin win the big one. I mean, SMU's great, but I've not seen them win the big one. And part of that's because they've played in the East Division that's been loaded with Michigan and Ohio State for so long. But this is probably going to be the year to do that, right? I mean, if you're not going to do it this year, with all they have back and the quarterback and the changes at Michigan and Ohio State that I just don't know when you're going to do it.
Our Penn State guy from Rivals says that they have one offensive lineman who's going to go extremely high in the draft. He's got one of these names that's like 14 letters long. I forget his name. But the entire two deep on the offensive line is back at Penn State other than him. And both of their backs, who gained almost 1,000 yards last year for the second consecutive year, they're both back. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton.
By the way, can I just mention this? I know we're going away from quarterback and we're running out of time here, but I will say this. I think we brought this up. Was it last week, the week before? We were going through combine results, and somebody tagged me. Some person on Twitter tagged me and had apparently identified those draft eval scores from previous players, previous draft classes. Because maybe we were talking about like, oh, well, all these scores seem low, but maybe Iowa players typically get low scores in general. Let me see if I can find some of these. And again, maybe we'll have to do this, address this next week. But in just scrolling through some of these results, assuming these are accurate, again, I can't validate even who this person is on Twitter. Everybody's got an alias nowadays, but it sounded to me, based on the numbers, that what we guessed to be true, it was absolutely true. That those were low scores that Iowa posted in general from the combine last week. And let's see here, I'm 4 days back here. I got all these women's basketball things on my timeline here, Mark. Let's see here.
I know what it's like.
Okay, here it is. Actually, I think this guy tagged you as well. Oh, crap. Now it took me back to the beginning. You're going to have to give me a minute. It took me all the way back to the beginning because I hit the back button.
Yeah.
I love technology. Don't you love that?
Well, if you tagged me, I'll find it.
Yeah, it's somewhere here. But it's this guy that has an alias of like Fullback University or something like that.
Well, it would be interesting to know because then we know that Iowa produces NFL players at a rate that's top 10 in the country, whatever the number is. They're like seventh or eighth or ninth in the NFL in terms of NFL products currently on NFL rosters. What I would love to see somebody do sometime is take the quantity of NFL players from colleges on rosters and give each player some kind of category of whether you're like an all pro or you're just a solid starter, et cetera, et cetera. And then because the quality of the Iowa players seems to be rather high.
Here's some results. So again, this is according to Twitter alias that I'm not going to endorse, neither, condone, but or condemn. But so here's some tight end results. So Lachey, his draft score we talked about was 5.94, and I think that put him into like the eventually maybe a starter range. 5.94. Here are the other tight ends, recent tight ends that have been drafted, like starting tight ends at Iowa that we perceive to be NFL tight ends. Eric All, 6'14", Sam Laporta, 6'18", TJ Hawkinson, 6'80", Noah Fant, 6'40", George Kittle, now here's one, 5'90". So he actually was a little lower than Lachey, but all of those other tight ends had substantially higher scores, draft scores. That's a substantial difference when you're looking through the scores. Linebacker, here's another good one because they had a lot of great linebackers come out of Iowa here of late. Jay Higgins, tested out 5'6'8". Here are the other scores from guys that top tight end or linebackers that ended up being NFL guys. Jack Campbell, 6'20". Again, Higgins was 5'6'8". Josie Jewell, 5'90". Christian Kirksey, 5'80". And now here's one that defied the odds. Anthony Hitchens, who turned into a really solid NFL linebacker, 5'40". He was substantially lower than Higgins. So again, these scores clearly don't make it impossible. And Hitchens still got drafted. I think Kittle was a third or fourth round pick, I think. Could be wrong. Right. I believe Beathard got drafted a little higher than he did, but he wasn't a high draft pick. We know that. So the score, I would guess, certainly didn't help him, his combine results. Safeties, Castro tested. This is an interesting one. Castro tested out at 5'9'5". Dane Belton was 5'8'6". Lonnie Hooker, 6'30". Geno Stone, 5'6'2". And apparently Micah Hyde did not have a score. I don't know if they didn't do those scores back then, but so, I mean, yeah, that maybe Castro, that score doesn't bother you too much. Cornerback, this one might be the one that would be most concerning besides tight end. Jamari tested out at 5'9'2". Here's some recent Iowa corners that tested at the combine. Cooper Jean, 6'3'6". Riley Moss, 6'1'2". Josh Jackson. Listen, this one's nuts. 6'7". He hadn't even panned out that well in the NFL. So these are not an exact science. Desmond King, 6'2". Michael Ojemudia, 5'9". So basically, he and Harrison and Ojemudia had this exact same score. Ojemudia is sort of stuck in the league. Certainly hasn't been a star like DeJean and Desmond King. Even Riley Moss has elevated himself to a starting level corner for the Broncos. So I appreciate this guy for tagging me in this. I can't, without doing extra research, can't corroborate all this, but I think it says what we suspected, that those scores were low, even for Iowa standards, but it does not necessarily mean all those guys are destined to fail.
George Kittle, by the way, 5th round, pick 146.
Pick 146. And I think Beathard was 4th, 3rd or 4th. Actually, he might have been 3rd. Was he 3rd round?
Who drafted CJ Beathard?
The Niners. They drafted both.
Let
me see here. CJ Beathard draft. CJ Beathard was the 104th overall pick in the 3rd round. Too high or too low? Third round, using a third round pick on a guy who cemented himself as a backup for his entire career. Has started some, but he's never. I mean, and I don't think he probably will.
Way too high.
Way too high. So you don't draft backups in the third round. I mean, I really don't know. I really don't know.
I've always heard that if you're drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, you should be a starter within a couple years.
Even as a quarterback is the same. I just know quarterbacks get drafted higher in general, right, than a lot of positions.
Yeah, because there's a thought that, hey, if we get the right guy, obviously we've changed our franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we went through NFL starting quarterbacks, I don't know what the what word am I looking for? Just kind of the broad stroke, numbers through the rounds would be. They're obviously not all first rounders that elevate to be starters.
By the way, why do we give almost 150 people on now? Is it just all these people get off work and then, it's like we had 100 people for a long time. In the last 10 minutes of the show, we get 140 people. I mean, it's great. I'm glad they're here, but it's like, it's,
I put us on Facebook too.
Oh, good. We're on Facebook. Excellent.
I was scanning through the Facebook archives when we posted shows in the past, and I was somewhat surprised at, just since it's so random, that people have, there might be 30 views, 700 views. There was one like 1,500 views, 30 views, 30 views, 30 views. So I don't know.
Danielle is off work, she says. So we were right on that one. And I have noticed the same thing. Folks, if you are on Facebook, even if you don't use your Facebook, please take a moment to go on Facebook, share the link out, click the like button, comment if you so desire. Facebook's a difficult one. It's very up and down. I think there's a barrier you have to break through, and I won't go into some of my other ventures that have involved Facebook, but there is a secret to it, and it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah. I go back and forth between the concentrated, it should all be on YouTube and let's bring in everyone to YouTube, versus, hey, let's spread it out there and get it out there on as many platforms as possible.
Right.
Regardless, I should be consistent one way or the other. And I think my consistency is going to be, we're going to put it on Facebook because it's a completely different audience. And I think
have you been streaming all your stuff on Twitter as well?
Again, I've been inconsistent.
Okay. All right.
Do you post your live streams on anything else?
That is a consideration that I've had conversations with people about and have not yet done. If that happens, see, I'm the opposite of you, and I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but when I do something, I go all in on it. So I'm not like, I don't tinker with stuff. I either do it or I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're right or I'm wrong,
Sure.
vice versa, but that's something that if I do that, it'll be an off-season decision, and then it'll happen. And so, but yeah, I get the struggle. Doesn't mean I don't think about it.
All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here. And again, join Corey after the Hawkeyes meeting with the Buckeyes at the Big Ten tournament. And so that should be sometime after the tip-offs at 5 Central on Wednesday.
5 Central time. I'll throw the banner up one more time. 5 Central time Wednesday, Peacock, and then live post-game coverage over it from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube.
Excellent. Make it on back here at the Voice of College Football with Corey and myself next Tuesday at 4:30 Central. We'll see you then.